The throne hall of the alien empire was filled with a heavy silence. Golden walls stretched high above, carved with strange glowing symbols. Thousands of warriors stood in rows, their armor shining, their weapons ready. All eyes were fixed on one figure in the center, a human, chained and bruised, yet still standing tall. The queen of the empire sat on her throne of crystal and fire. Her long silver crown sparkled, and her voice echoed with power. She looked at the human with cold eyes, filled with pride and cruelty. Around her, the alien nobles whispered, waiting to see the humiliation of the last human warrior. The queen lifted her hand slowly, and the entire hall went silent. Her voice rang out like thunder. "Kneel before me, human." Her words were sharp, like a blade, filled with command. The warriors shouted in agreement, their voices rising. "Kneel, kneel, kneel." The human stood still, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. Blood marked his face, his armor was broken, and his hands were tied. Yet, even in his weakness, there was something different in his eyes. He did not look broken. He did not look afraid. For a moment, the hall waited for him to resist. The aliens expected rage, defiance, or some desperate last words. But instead, the human lowered his head slowly. A small, almost invisible smile touched his lips. Gasps filled the hall. The warriors laughed. "See, the human is weak. They all fall in the end." The queen leaned forward, her voice mocking. "So, even the strongest among your kind bows before me." She raised her hand higher, enjoying the sight of him sinking down. The human bent one knee, then the other. His chains rattled against the stone floor, echoing like thunder in the silent hall. The crowd roared with laughter, believing victory was complete. But inside the human's mind, thoughts burned like fire. He remembered the mission, the sacrifice, the reason he had allowed himself to be captured. Every step, every wound, every humiliation was part of the plan. He was not kneeling out of fear. He was kneeling to get closer to what he needed, closer to the heart of the empire, closer to the hidden secret beneath the queen's throne. His breathing slowed, his eyes lifted slightly, watching the glowing lines on the floor. He could feel the energy pulsing beneath the stone. The aliens thought he was broken, but in truth, he was closer than ever to victory. Every second on his knees brought him nearer to the moment he was waiting for. The queen stood tall, her cape flowing behind her. She looked down at him with pride, speaking loudly so all could hear. "You see, my warriors, this is the fate of humans," she declared. "They are nothing but servants, born to kneel, born to obey." The hall erupted with cheers. Weapons struck against the ground. The sound was deafening, filling the chamber with thunder. The human lowered his head further, hiding the dangerous smile that now spread across his face. The queen thought she had won, but she had no idea that her command had opened the first door of his plan. The alien nobles whispered among themselves. One said, "He kneels too easily." Another replied, "It is fear, nothing more." But in the corner, a young guard frowned, sensing something strange, yet unable to name it. The human clenched his fists, chains biting into his skin. Pain ran through his body, but he welcomed it. It reminded him of his purpose. He thought of his people, scattered and hunted, waiting for someone to strike back. He thought of the promise he made before leaving, to never let humanity fall. The queen stepped down from her throne, her heels striking the floor like thunder. She approached him slowly, her shadow falling over his bowed form. "Pathetic," she whispered. "You humans are nothing, and soon you will be forgotten." She placed her hand under his chin, forcing him to lift his head. For a second, their eyes met. Her gaze was filled with arrogance. His gaze was calm, almost too calm. It was in that moment, hidden beneath his silence, that the queen missed the truth. The truth that he was not broken. He was waiting. The hall celebrated. The queen laughed, and the warriors cheered. But deep inside the silence of his heart, the human whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." And as he remained on his knees, a secret fire burned brighter than ever. The crowd saw weakness. The queen saw victory. But none of them understood. Kneeling was not his defeat. It was his choice, his move, his first step in a plan that would soon turn the empire upside down. And so, in the grand throne hall filled with laughter and arrogance, the human knelt before the alien queen. But he knelt not as a servant, not as a broken man. He knelt as a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hall still roared with laughter, the sound of alien warriors echoing against the crystal walls. The queen stood tall, satisfied with the image before her, a human kneeling in chains. Her empire's strength was confirmed in the eyes of her people, and she basked in their cheers. But no one noticed the tiny shift in the human's lips, a curve so slight it looked like a shadow. It was not surrender, it was a smile, quiet and dangerous. The human lowered his gaze, keeping his head bowed. From above he looked broken, obedient, and defeated. But behind his lowered eyes, his mind was alive, sharp like a blade. He remembered every word of the mission brief, every risk he had agreed to. He had not come here to beg for mercy. He had come to play the long game. The queen circled him slowly, her silver crown shining under the burning lights. "Do you see now?" she shouted to the crowd, her voice echoing. "This is what happens when humans dare to challenge my empire. They kneel, they break, they vanish." The warriors raised their weapons high, chanting her name, their voices shaking the floor. To them, the kneeling man was a symbol of weakness, proof that humanity was finished. Yet in the human silence, something strange lived. The young guard in the corner frowned again, his instincts restless. He whispered to another, "Why does he smile when no one looks?" But the other brushed him off, laughing. "You imagine fear where there is none." Still, the unease lingered, thin as smoke in the air. The chains rattled as the human shifted his weight. He lowered his body a little more, his knee pressing harder into the cold floor. He let his shoulders sink as if he carried unbearable shame. But deep inside, he was measuring the distance, every step, every angle. He was counting heartbeats, waiting for the signal he alone could feel. The queen stopped in front of him, her voice soft now, sharp with venom. "You will serve as a warning to the rest of your kind. Your image will spread across the stars, and they will know that even the strongest human kneels at my command." She lifted his chin again with her jeweled hand, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes were cruel, hers burned with victory. But his eyes, calm and steady, hid a secret storm. He whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "Is that what you think?" The queen narrowed her eyes, but before she could answer, he dropped his gaze once more. His lips curled, a soft smile hidden beneath blood and shadow. That smile was not for her, not for the crowd, but for himself, because he knew he was exactly where he needed to be, far below the throne room, deep beneath the polished stone. The Empire's great energy core pulsed. It was the heart of their power, the very source of their weapons and fleets. Few ever stood this close to it. Fewer still understood its rhythms. But the human did because he had studied it for years. And now, kneeling before the queen, his body lined up perfectly with the hidden conduits beneath the floor, he shifted his wrists, the chains grinding into raw flesh. The warriors laughed, thinking he was squirming in pain. But he was adjusting the tiny device hidden in the cuff of his armor, a device so small it looked like nothing at all. The moment he bent forward, it pressed against the floor, syncing with the pulse of the core. The first spark of connection lit up silently, unseen by any alien eyes. The queen raised her arms high, basking in her people's cheers. She shouted, "The age of humans is over." The crowd roared louder, stomping their feet, their weapons striking the ground. But beneath their victory song, another rhythm began to beat. A rhythm only the human could hear, a code, a signal, a countdown. He smiled again, softer this time, as if amused by some private joke. To the aliens, it was the smile of a broken man who accepted his fate. To himself, it was the smile of a predator who had just stepped into the perfect trap. He whispered under his breath, too low for anyone but himself to hear. Almost there, the queen tilted her head, frowning slightly, but quickly dismissed it. The young guard shivered, his instincts screaming again. He leaned to his captain and said, "There is something wrong. He kneels too easily." The captain laughed, slapping his shoulder. "You are green, boy, still afraid of shadows." But the boy's eyes never left the human, watching every quiet smile, every calm breath. And though he could not explain it, he felt that the real danger had only just begun. The human's knees pressed firmly into the stone, his chains heavy, his head bowed. But his silence spoke louder than any words. He was not defeated. He was waiting. He was not kneeling in shame. He was kneeling with purpose. And in that throne hall filled with cheers and arrogance, only he knew the truth. The truth that the command to kneel was never her victory. It was his opening move, and the silent smile on his face was the first sign that the game had just begun. The throne hall still trembled with cheers, every alien warrior pounding the floor with their weapons. The queen raised her arms, her voice like thunder, and declared again that humanity was finished. Her words filled the chamber, but they did not reach the heart of the man on his knees. Because inside the human's mind, the noise of the hall faded, replaced by memory. He remembered the moment he had volunteered for this mission. A secret council had gathered in the ruins of an old city. The war had gone badly for humans. Worlds had been lost, families scattered. Hope had become a fragile flame, almost ready to die. And yet, when the leaders asked for someone to risk everything, he had stepped forward. "Let me be taken," he had said, his voice steady. "They believe they can break us, but if they take me into their core, I will show them that humans never kneel without reason." The council had argued, some saying it was madness, others calling it bravery. But in the end, they gave him the device, a tool so small it looked like nothing, yet powerful enough to change the course of a war. He had promised he would carry it with him, even into chains, even into death. And now, in the heart of the alien empire, he was keeping that promise. The tiny spar from his cuff had already reached the hidden lines beneath the throne hall. Each second that passed, the device sinked deeper with the energy core. The aliens thought he was kneeling in defeat, but in truth, he was planting the first seed of their downfall. The queen paced before him, her eyes filled with victory. She leaned close and whispered, so only he could hear, "Your people will see this moment. They will see you kneel, and their last hope will break." The human did not answer. He only lowered his eyes further. But inside, he whispered to himself, "Hope does not break. It hides, it waits, it strikes when the time is right." His mind drifted again, this time to the memory of his family. A small home, a warm fire, laughter that now felt like echoes. He remembered his brother, his wife, his little daughter with bright eyes. He had left them behind with a promise. "I will return," or "I will make sure you live free." The image burned inside him, fueling every quiet breath he took. The crowd cheered louder, their voices shaking the walls. The nobles clapped, the guards smirked. No one noticed the faint vibration under their feet, so faint it felt like imagination. But the human noticed, his lips curving once more in that secret smile. The trap was alive now, breathing with the rhythm of the core. He shifted his chains again, carefully, not too fast, not too obvious. Each movement pressed the device closer. Each second brought him nearer to control. The young guard in the corner still watched, his heart uneasy. He whispered again, "He is not broken," but no one listened. To them, the kneeling man was already forgotten, already defeated. The queen raised her staff, the crystal at its top glowing with fire. "Bow deeper," she commanded, her voice sharp. The human obeyed, lowering his head to the floor. The crowd roared again, seeing only weakness. But beneath that movement, the device made full contact, locking into the pulse of the Empire's power. A single word flashed in his mind, a code only he knew, linked. And with that, the plan had truly begun. Still, he did not rise, he did not fight, not yet. Patience was his weapon now, Silence was his shield. The queen walked away, confident that she had crushed him. Her people shouted her name, their voices filled with pride. But below them all, the foundation of their empire had already been touched by human hands. The kneeling man breathed slowly, his eyes closed. The world thought it had seen a broken prisoner. But in truth, it had witnessed the first move of a hunter. The trap was set, hidden in plain sight, and the human waited, smiling in silence, for the moment it would snap shut. The throne hall pulsed with energy, the cheers of the alien warriors echoing through every corner. The queen walked proudly down the steps of her throne, her jeweled cape dragging behind her like the tail of a comet. Her crown caught the firelight, her eyes burning with satisfaction. In her mind, she had broken a human before the eyes of her empire, and no victory could be sweeter. The human still knelt at the center of the chamber, his head bowed, his body still. Chains clinked softly whenever he moved, but his silence was louder than any scream. To the crowd, he looked crushed, destroyed, the perfect picture of submission. But to himself, he was closer than ever to the moment he had been waiting for. The queen circled him slowly, her heels clicking against the polished stone. She looked down at him with disdain, speaking so that every warrior could hear. "Behold, my loyal soldiers," she declared, her voice sharp and proud. "This is the end of human arrogance. They thought themselves brave, they thought themselves strong, but in the end they kneel like all lesser beings." The warriors shouted in triumph, raising their weapons to the sky. Some stomped the floor in rhythm, their armor clanging like drums of war. The sound shook the chamber, filling it with thunder. But none of them noticed the faint pulse running beneath the floor, a heartbeat hidden from alien ears. The queen bent closer, tilting her head at the human, her smile cruel. "Do you know what your people will see?" she whispered, her voice like poison. "They will see their champion on his knees. They will see their last hope bow to me, and their spirit will break." She waited for him to respond, to beg, to curse, to show any sign of weakness. But the human remained quiet, his breathing slow, his eyes hidden. Her smile widened as she laughed, the sound cutting through the silence. "How pitiful! Even your voice has abandoned you," she mocked. "Perhaps this is why humans were never meant to rule the stars. They are too fragile, too simple, too small." The nobles joined in her laughter, their elegant robes swaying as they clapped their hands. But still, the human did not move, and that silence gnawed at her pride. He felt her words like blades, but he did not let them pierce his spirit. Every insult, every mockery only fueled the fire inside him. He thought again of his people, waiting in the shadows of ruined worlds. He thought of the promise he had made, that no matter what, he would not bow in defeat. And though his knees touched the stone, he knew the truth. This was not surrender, it was strategy. The queen placed her hand under his chin again, lifting his face so the crowd could see. The light revealed the faintest smile still resting on his lips. It was not the smile of a broken man, but of someone who knew a secret the others did not. The queen's brow furrowed for a moment, confusion flickering across her face. But pride smothered it quickly, and she raised her voice once more. "Look at him," she cried, pointing at his bowed figure. Even now he tries to smile, but it is empty, it is hollow, it is the mask of defeat. The crowd roared again, feeding on her words, their chants shaking the pillars. But among them, the young guard clenched his fists, still watching carefully. To him, that smile was not hollow, it was dangerous. The human let his head fall again, letting the queen bask in her false victory. All the while, the device pressed deeper into the floor. The vibration grew stronger, still hidden beneath the roar of the crowd. He could feel it now, the core responding, waiting, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Every second that passed brought him closer to the moment when everything would change. The queen stepped back, raising her staff high, the crystal burning with energy. "You will remain on your knees until your last breath," she declared. And when your people see this, they will know they have no future. They will know only despair. Her laughter rang through the hall, cruel and sharp. But beneath her triumph, the trap was already alive, coiled and waiting. The human closed his eyes, his smile hidden once more. Her mockery was loud, her pride blinding, her arrogance endless. But all of it served his purpose, because the more she gloated, the less she saw. The less she noticed the truth right beneath her throne. And soon, very soon, her laughter would turn to silence. For now, he let her mock, he let her laugh, he let her believe, because he knew something she did not. But the command to kneel was never her victory. It was his plan, and he had already set it in motion. The throne hall still rang with laughter, the queen's voice rising above all. Her soldiers pounded their weapons against the stone floor, proud of her victory. The human remained on his knees, still silent, still calm, still watching. His body appeared weak, but inside him a storm was beginning to rise. The device hidden within his armor now hummed with life. It had reached full connection with the energy lines beneath the throne. The core's pulse grew stronger, every beat matching his own heartbeat. For the first time since his capture, he felt power flowing back toward him. At first, it was subtle, a faint flicker of the light torches along the walls. The aliens barely noticed, some even laughed at it. But the young guard frowned again, his eyes fixed on the human. He whispered, "The lights do not flicker without reason." The captain beside him scoffed, but the unease spread slowly. The queen raised her staff, preparing to finish her speech. She wanted her empire to remember this moment forever. She shouted, "This human is the symbol of their weakness. Let him be remembered as the one who bowed to me." The hall erupted with cheers again, but the words barely reached the human, because deep beneath the floor something shifted. The vibrations grew stronger, running through the stone like a hidden quake. The human felt it first, the ground trembling softly under his knees. His lips curved again into that dangerous smile. The queen mistook it for madness, mocking him once more. "Still smiling, human? You do not even know that your story ends here." But her words cracked against the silence that followed, because this time the flicker of the lights did not stop. One by one, the glowing torches dimmed, shadows crawling across the golden walls. The warriors looked around, confused, their chants faltering. The hum of the energy core below grew louder, vibrating through the air. The queen's pride wavered, her staff glowing brighter as she tried to control the hall. "Do not fear, it is nothing," she shouted, though her voice carried unease. But the soldiers shifted nervously, gripping their weapons tighter. The nobles whispered, their laughter gone. And at the center, the human slowly lifted his head, his chains rattling softly. For the first time, he looked directly at the queen without being forced. His eyes burned with a calm fire, his voice low but clear. "You told me to kneel," he said, "but you never asked why I agreed." The queen froze, her smile fading. The hall fell into silence. Every warrior, every noble, every servant now stared at him. The ground shook harder, cracks forming along the crystal floor. A deep hum filled the chamber, resonating with the pulse of his device. Alien weapons glowed faintly, then suddenly went dark. One soldier raised his blaster, but it sputtered out in his hand. Gasps spread through the crowd, fear replacing triumph. The queen's voice rose in anger. "What have you done?" The human stood slowly, chains still wrapped around him, but no longer holding him down. His movements were steady, powerful, every step echoing louder than before. He looked at her with steady eyes and whispered, "I have done nothing yet. This is only the beginning." The queen stumbled back, her soldiers rushing forward, but their weapons remained lifeless. Panic spread through the throne hall. The proud warriors who had laughed now shouted in confusion. The nobles who had mocked now shrank back in fear. The young guard whispered, "I knew it," as his heart raced. And the human, still chained but unbroken, now stood tall before them all. The flickering lights suddenly blazed bright again, but no longer with alien fire. They glowed with a strange rhythm, pulsing like a heartbeat, the rhythm of the core, now in sync with the human's device. The queen realized the truth too late. By ordering him to kneel, she had placed him exactly where he needed to be. Her pride turned to rage as she raised her staff, energy surging, but her voice trembled when she shouted, "Stop him!" Her soldiers charged forward, yet their armor locked, their systems frozen. The human raised his head higher, smiling fully now. "Your power is no longer yours," he said calmly. "It is mine." The throne hall, once filled with mocking laughter, now drowned in silence and fear. The shift of power had begun, and the human, who had bowed in chains, now stood taller than any emperor. The throne hall shook like a living beast, the golden walls groaned, and the crystal pillars flickered with unstable light. Alien warriors who had once stood proud now struggled to keep their balance, their armor stiff and useless. Their weapons, once glowing with deadly fire, now hung heavy in their hands, dead and powerless. The nobles clutched each other, panic rising in their voices, their cheers gone, replaced by fear. At the center of it all, the human stood, his chains rattling but no longer binding. The faint glow of the energy core pulsed through the floor beneath him, sinking with every breath he took. He looked around slowly, calm, his silence more terrifying than any scream. For the first time since his capture, he was no longer prey. He was the storm they had invited into their heart. The queen's pride cracked like glass, her staff trembling in her grip. She shouted, "Hold him, stop him, kill him," her voice raw with fury. But her soldiers could not move, their armor locked, their systems frozen. Every command she gave turned to dust in the air, powerless against the force rising beneath their feet. The human's eyes met hers, sharp and steady. "You thought my kneeling meant surrender," he said softly, his voice carrying through the hall. "But it was the only way to stand where I needed to stand." His words struck harder than any weapon, and the queen staggered back, her breath caught in her throat. The floor split open with a sudden crack, glowing light spilling through the lines carved in stone. The energy core responded to his device, its rhythm now beating with his will. The entire throne hall pulsed with that rhythm, lights rising and falling like a giant heart. The empire's heart, now in the hands of the man they had mocked. The warriors tried again to lift their weapons, their voices desperate. But their blasters sputtered, their swords flickered, their shields collapsed. The human tilted his head slightly, watching them struggle. "You do not fight me now," he said. "You fight the truth you chose to ignore." The young guard, still watching from the corner, whispered, "He planned this all along." The queen's rage boiled, but underneath it, fear crept in like cold water. She had built her throne on control, on power, on the certainty that none could resist her. And yet here stood a man in chains, undoing her empire with nothing but patience and silence. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "You cannot win, you are only one." The human raised his head higher, his smile faint but unshakable. "One is enough," he replied. The crowd fell silent, every alien staring at him, as if seeing him for the first time. Not a broken captive, not a servant, but a force that could not be bent. The floor trembled harder, dust falling from the tall ceilings. The energy surged, spilling waves of light across the walls. Symbols carved in the stone glowed bright, ancient circuits alive again under his control. It was as if the empire itself bowed to him, answering his call. The queen tried to strike with her staff, fire bursting from its crystal tip, but the blast curved in midair, swallowed by the pulsing energy around him. Her eyes widened in horror as her own weapon betrayed her. The human whispered, "Even your throne listens to me now." Her scream echoed through the hall, filled with rage and fear. The nobles panicked, some trying to run, but the doors of the hall slammed shut, sealed by the same energy. The warriors shouted in confusion, trapped, helpless. The young guard stepped forward, his voice shaking. "My queen, we cannot fight him." The queen turned on him with fury, but her words failed because she knew he was right. The human took another step forward, the chains dragging against the stone. The sound was heavy, final like the toll of a bell. Each step he took made the hall shudder. Each breath he took made the lights flicker. And with every heartbeat, the Empire's power bent closer to his will. "You thought kneeling was the end," he said, his voice calm, steady, unstoppable. But kneeling was the beginning. The hall echoed with his words, carried by the very walls that once sang the Queen's name. Now those walls answered to him, their glow beating with his strength. The Queen stumbled back toward her throne, her eyes wide, her pride shattered. She had mocked him. She had laughed at him. She had used his silence as proof of weakness. But now, staring at the man who stood unbroken, she realized the truth. Her command had not enslaved him. It had freed him. And she had handed him the key to her empire with her own arrogance. The revelation struck her harder than any weapon. Her empire was no longer hers. Her throne was no longer hers. The human she had ordered to kneel now stood as master. And the Queen could only watch as her world slipped from her grasp. The throne hall was no longer the shining jewel of the alien empire. The walls shook with every pulse of the core. Glowing symbols danced like living fire across the stone. The once proud soldiers stood frozen, their weapons useless, their armor locked. The nobles huddled together, whispering in fear, their voices trembling. The Queen herself clutched her staff with white knuckles, her crown tilted, her pride shattered. And in the middle of the chaos, the human stood, tall even with chains still dragging at his wrists. His eyes burned with calm fire, his presence heavier than the throne itself. Each step he took forward made the hall tremble. Each breath carried power from the core below. He was no longer a prisoner, no longer a man in defeat. He was the master of the very empire that had mocked him. The Queen raised her staff again, desperation spilling from her voice. "You are nothing but a single human. You cannot take my empire." Her words cracked, unsteady, as though she herself no longer believed them. The human tilted his head, his smile faint and sharp. "Your empire is already mine," he answered calmly. The warriors shouted in panic, some trying to move, but their armor held them like statues. The young guard stared at the human with wide eyes, whispering, "He has become the core itself." The nobles wailed, some begging the Queen to save them, others calling for mercy. But the Queen had no control, no strength left. Her power was gone, drained away by her own arrogance. The human walked up the steps toward her throne, his chains scraping the stone. The sound echoed like thunder, final and heavy. The Queen backed away, her staff flickering, her crown shaking on her head. She shouted, "Stay back," but her voice held fear instead of command. The man she had ordered to kneel now rose higher with every step. At the top of the throne, he stopped, standing before her. The Queen's eyes burned with pride still, but fear swam underneath. "You think you can rule what you do not understand," she hissed. The human leaned closer, his voice low, steady, unshakable. "I do not need to rule. I only need to break the chains you placed on others." The hall fell silent, every alien holding their breath. The human's words carried across the chamber like fire. "You made a mistake, Queen," he said. "You thought kneeling meant defeat, but for me it meant position, patience, power." He lifted his chained hands slowly, and with a sudden flash, the chains cracked apart, falling to the floor like broken lies. The sound of metal against stone was the sound of a new era beginning. The Queen stumbled backward into her throne, her face pale, her staff dimmed, her crown slipped, and for the first time, she looked small. The man she had mocked now stood before her as the master of her world. He turned his gaze to the soldiers and nobles below. "Look at your empire," he said. "It is not hers anymore. It never was. It belongs to those who refuse to bow." The soldiers lowered their heads, unable to meet his eyes. The nobles cried softly, some falling to their knees in fear. The young guard, however, lifted his head, watching with awe. He whispered, "He does not just fight for himself, he fights for something greater." And in that moment, the seed of doubt spread through the alien hall. The queen tried one last time, her voice sharp but weak. "You cannot win, human. Even if you take this throne, my empire stretches beyond these walls. My fleets will crush you." The human stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. His voice was steady, every word like iron. "Then let them come, for I will stand, and I will never kneel again." The throne hall erupted with a final surge of energy, the core below beating like a living heart. The glow spread through every wall, every pillar, every weapon. It was no longer the queen's light. It was his, the mark of a new master. And though the future of the empire remained uncertain, one truth was clear. The queen had lost, and the human had risen. He turned away from her throne, his eyes scanning the hall of enemies who no longer dared to resist. Chains broken, silence heavy, fear thick in the air. He raised his voice once more, not with anger but with certainty. "You order me to kneel," he said, his words cutting through the hall like fire. "But you never understood. Kneeling was exactly what I wanted." The silence that followed was absolute. No laughter, no cheers, no mockery remained. Only the sound of an empire crumbling beneath the weight of truth. And in that silence, one man stood unbroken, the true master of the throne.